Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to hand you something that could change your life. A single question that can expose a narcissist clearly and instantly. Because when you're dealing with someone who manipulates, gaslights, or plays mind games, it's not always easy to spot the red flags until it's too late. At first glance, narcissists can be some of the most captivating people you'll ever meet. They often present themselves as charismatic, confident, successful, and even compassionate. They know exactly how to say the right things, wear the right expressions, and mimic emotional intelligence. In fact, many narcissists have spent years, sometimes their entire lives, perfecting this social mask. They learn how to charm, how to mirror your emotions, and how to gain your trust. That's the illusion. This crafted persona isn't real. It's a facade designed to lure people in. It serves a very specific purpose: to secure admiration, attention, and control. Everything they project on the surface is curated to maintain an image that keeps others engaged, impressed, or even dependent on them emotionally. But underneath that polished exterior lies a very different reality: deep insecurity, a fragile ego, and a compulsive need for validation. Narcissists crave superiority and dominance, but they lack the emotional maturity and self-awareness to earn those things through authenticity. So instead, they construct an identity based on grandiosity and manipulation. The illusion is so convincing, especially early on, that many people don't realize they're dealing with a narcissist until the damage is done. The charm, the attentiveness, the seemingly deep connections, it all feels real in the beginning. But slowly, patterns begin to emerge. Inconsistencies, self-centered behavior, a lack of empathy, emotional manipulation, and a total inability to take responsibility for their actions. This is the hallmark of narcissism, the ability to hide dysfunction behind a convincing mask. That's why exposing a narcissist requires more than just watching what they say. It requires paying close attention to how they respond when that mask is even slightly threatened. No matter how carefully a narcissist constructs their public persona, that mask is always fragile because it's built on lies, exaggerations, and emotional manipulation. The moment their ego is threatened, even in the smallest way, you start to see the cracks. And what lies beneath isn't pretty. Narcissists thrive on control and admiration. Their sense of self-worth is almost entirely dependent on how others see them. So when something challenges that, whether it's a mild critique, a differing opinion, or even a question that implies they're not perfect, it triggers a powerful reaction. Why? Because narcissists aren't emotionally equipped to handle being wrong, being questioned, or being exposed. When a healthy person faces criticism or is held accountable, they might feel a bit uncomfortable, sure, but they usually reflect, adjust, or at least engage in a civil conversation. A narcissist, on the other hand, experiences criticism as a personal attack. It doesn't matter how gentle, thoughtful, or constructive it is. To them, any challenge to their perceived superiority is a threat to their entire identity. That's when the real personality comes out. You'll see them deflect blame, lash out, gaslight, or suddenly play the victim. They might become passive-aggressive, sarcastic, or cold. In some cases, they might even explode in rage or retreat into silence as a form of punishment. All of these are defense mechanisms to protect their fragile ego from crumbling. This moment when their ego is confronted and they can no longer keep up the performance is when the truth finally begins to emerge. It's often subtle at first, but unmistakable. The charm fades, the confidence turns into defensiveness, and the loving words become manipulative tactics. Ironically, it's not in their best moments, but in their worst reactions that a narcissist reveals who they truly are. So if you ever want to see behind the mask, you don't need to be aggressive or accuse them directly. Just introduce a little friction, a little resistance to their control, and pay close attention. You won't have to look hard. The mask will slip, because it always does when the ego feels exposed. It might seem like a simple question, almost casual, even harmless, but in reality, it's one of the most revealing and psychologically strategic things you can ask someone you suspect may have narcissistic tendencies. Why? Because this one question touches the very core of a narcissist's greatest weakness: their inability to process anything that challenges their inflated self-image. When you ask someone, how do you handle criticism, you're not just asking for a textbook answer. You're opening a door into how they truly view themselves and how they relate to others. It's a litmus test for emotional maturity, self-awareness, and empathy. Most people, especially those who are emotionally grounded, will acknowledge that criticism can be uncomfortable, but also valuable. You might hear responses like, "It's hard sometimes, but I try to take it constructively," or "I appreciate it when it's honest and respectful. It helps me grow." These answers reveal humility, openness, and a willingness to self-reflect. But a narcissist? Their response will be very different and often telling, because this question puts them in a position where they must consider the possibility that they are not perfect, that someone might see a flaw in them, or that they have room for improvement. To a narcissist, those ideas are intolerable, so their answer will often be defensive, dismissive, or evasive. They might say something like, "I don't need criticism. People just misunderstand me. I've never really gotten criticism. People know I'm good at what I do." Depends who it's coming from. Most people don't know what they're talking about. Or they might even laugh it off, saying, "I just ignore it. Haters gonna hate." Some narcissists will even try to spin it in a way that subtly puts you on the defensive, flipping the script so they remain in control. For example, "Why? Are you trying to criticize me?" Instantly making the conversation about your intentions rather than their answer. In these moments, their discomfort will often betray them. You might notice a shift in tone, a slight tension in their body language, or a forced attempt to keep their composure. That's because they're walking a tightrope between keeping their mask in place and reacting to the perceived threat of judgment. This question, though simple, is psychologically loaded. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't attack, and yet it forces them to confront something they work tirelessly to avoid: accountability. And because narcissists are so invested in preserving their flawless self-image, they can't help but respond in a way that reveals their true colors. It's not the question itself that has the power. It's what it represents. It represents a mirror being held up, a challenge to the narrative they've crafted. And how they respond tells you more about who they really are than any lengthy conversation ever could. Words can be rehearsed. Facial expressions can be faked. Even empathy can be mimicked for a time. But reactions, those unfiltered split-second responses, are hard to control. That's why when you ask a narcissist how they handle criticism, you need to focus less on the exact words they say and more on how they say it, how quickly they say it, and what shifts in their energy the moment the question is out there. Because in that brief pause in that visceral response, everything you need to know will start to surface. When a narcissist is confronted with anything that even hints at judgment, their brain kicks into self-preservation mode. You may see a flash of irritation in their eyes, a forced smile, or a sudden change in tone. They might speak faster, more loudly, or with just a touch too much confidence. Some will stumble for a moment, clearly caught off guard. Others will try to flip the narrative, deflect, redirect, or subtly belittle the question. You might also hear subtle signs of defensiveness wrapped in polished language. For example, "I'm just very misunderstood. People are intimidated by how direct I am. Most people can't keep up with my standards." They might even throw in a jab at others to maintain their superior stance. Criticism only comes from people who are jealous. I've learned to ignore negativity. Successful people always have haters. What you won't get is a humble, thoughtful response. You won't hear anything that sounds like, "I try to reflect on it," or "It can sting sometimes, but I see it as a growth opportunity." Those types of answers would require self-awareness, emotional resilience, and a sense of inner security, traits narcissists typically lack or only pretend to have. Even more revealing is how long they stay on the subject. A narcissist will often rush to change the topic once they've given a surface-level answer, trying to steer the conversation back to themselves in a more flattering light. They may even attempt to charm their way out of the moment, cracking a joke or shifting attention to you. But hey, what about you? How do you handle criticism? This maneuver is classic. It keeps them in control and stops the focus from staying on their perceived vulnerability. The truth is, the reaction you get from a narcissist when they're put in a position of accountability is not just about one question. It's a preview of how they will respond in the future. When things go wrong, when you disagree with them, when you express a need or boundary. If their response to a simple question like this is dismissive, hostile, or evasive, imagine how they'll react when real relationship challenges arise. So pay close attention. Their reaction isn't random. It's a glimpse into their emotional blueprint. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. One of the clearest distinctions between someone emotionally healthy and someone with narcissistic traits is their relationship with vulnerability. Emotionally mature people don't see flaws or criticism as threats. They see them as opportunities to grow. They understand that being imperfect is simply part of being human, and they have developed the inner strength to acknowledge, process, and learn from their mistakes. This is a powerful trait, and it's the exact opposite of how a narcissist behaves. When you ask a healthy person, "How do you handle criticism?" you're likely to receive an answer that reflects self-awareness, emotional regulation, and a willingness to take responsibility. They might say things like, "It depends on how it's given, but I try to listen and reflect. I'm not perfect, so if someone has constructive feedback, I want to hear it. I've learned to pause before reacting. I want to grow from it, even if it stings." These kinds of responses come from people who are not ruled by their egos. They understand that criticism, when delivered respectfully, can be a catalyst for personal development. And even when criticism feels uncomfortable or challenging, they can sit with that discomfort instead of becoming reactive. They can separate their behavior from their identity. They understand that being wrong about something doesn't make them unworthy, it just makes them human. In relationships, whether personal, professional, or romantic. This ability to admit faults is absolutely essential. It creates an environment of trust where people feel safe to speak honestly, to express needs, to give and receive feedback without fear. When someone can own their actions, apologize sincerely, and commit to doing better, it strengthens the bond between them and others. That kind of accountability builds respect. It also creates space for empathy. People who are comfortable admitting when they're wrong are often more understanding when others mess up too. They don't rush to judge or shame. Instead, they approach situations with curiosity and compassion. This is what makes them emotionally safe to be around. You don't have to walk on eggshells or hide your feelings because they won't explode at the slightest sign of critique. Compare that with a narcissist who interprets even the mildest feedback as an insult, a betrayal, or a personal attack. They don't just reject the criticism, they reject the person giving it. That's because their identity is so fragile, so heavily dependent on being seen as superior or flawless, that even a small comment can feel like emotional annihilation. So when you ask that question, how do you handle criticism? A healthy person doesn't flinch. They don't get cagey or hostile or try to twist the conversation. They simply answer. And in that answer, you'll hear something rare and powerful: humility. That one trait says more about their emotional health than 100 compliments or declarations ever could. Asking a question like, "How do you handle criticism?" isn't a trap. It's not an act of aggression. It's not meant to provoke, intimidate, or embarrass anyone. In fact, it's not even really about them. It's about you gaining clarity. It's about understanding who you're dealing with, what their emotional capacity is, and how safe or unsafe they might be to let into your life. Many people hesitate to ask direct questions or make observations about someone's behavior because they fear it will lead to confrontation. Especially if you've ever dealt with a narcissist before, you may have been conditioned to tiptoe around them, to avoid setting them off. That fear can run deep. Narcissists often make you feel like you're the problem for noticing their behavior. They punish you, subtly or overtly, for seeing too much or asking too much. And so over time, you begin to silence your own intuition. But let's be clear, asking questions is not confrontational. Seeking clarity is not uncomfortable. Wanting to understand someone's emotional maturity is not overstepping, it's self-protection. There's nothing wrong with paying attention, with observing how someone responds to uncomfortable truths, or with gently probing into areas that reveal character. Because the reality is, clarity is the foundation of all healthy relationships. You deserve to know if the person you're dealing with has the ability to take responsibility, to reflect, and to grow. You deserve to know whether you're talking to someone who can have a two-way conversation, or someone who expects blind loyalty and constant validation. And one of the simplest ways to find that out is by watching how they respond to a question that challenges their ego even slightly. Clarity protects you from illusions. It protects you from wasting time and emotional energy on people who are not capable of reciprocating respect or accountability. It keeps you from getting sucked into the exhausting push-pull dynamic that narcissists create, where one moment you're their favorite person and the next you're the enemy, for simply setting a boundary or voicing a concern. The question you ask isn't a sword, it's a flashlight. It reveals what's really there, beneath the surface charm or confidence. And if someone reacts poorly to that kind of inquiry, that's not your fault. That's simply data information you can use to decide how much access that person should have to your life, your time, your heart, or your energy. When your goal is clarity, not confrontation, your power shifts. You're no longer trying to fix someone, change them, or decode their behavior. You're simply observing, learning, and responding accordingly. That kind of emotional detachment is not cold, it's wise. It's how you stay grounded when dealing with difficult personalities. And in that space of clarity, you reclaim your ability to choose who to trust, who to invest in, and who to walk away from, no matter how convincing their mask may be. In any interaction, especially with someone who may have narcissistic traits, your greatest tool, your most powerful line of defense is awareness, not confrontation, not over-explaining yourself, not trying to fix them, just awareness. Why? Because narcissists thrive in environments where people are unsure, emotionally reactive, or easily manipulated. They depend on confusion. They rely on your tendency to doubt yourself, to give the benefit of the doubt, or to rationalize their behavior. The less aware you are of what's happening, the more power they have over you. But the moment you become aware, the dynamic changes completely. Awareness puts you back in control, not of them, but of yourself. It allows you to step back and observe rather than get emotionally entangled. You begin to recognize the patterns, how they twist words, how they shift blame, how they play victim while hurting others, how they charm only when it serves them. With awareness, you no longer absorb their behavior as a reflection of your worth. You see it for what it is, a performance, a tactic, a strategy to maintain control. This shift in perception is everything. When you know what you're looking at, you stop personalizing the manipulation. You stop thinking, what did I do wrong? And start realizing this is about their inability to take responsibility. That clarity becomes your emotional armor. It protects your peace. It prevents you from being dragged into endless arguments, guilt trips, and cycles of emotional chaos. Awareness also helps you detach without guilt. Because here's the thing, narcissists often use guilt and obligation to keep people tethered to them. They make you feel bad for setting boundaries, for saying no, for walking away. But when you're aware, truly aware, you can spot those tactics in real time. You can tell the difference between genuine care and emotional manipulation. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee it. What's more, awareness empowers you to act, not from a place of fear or reactivity, but from a place of calm strength. You might not always be able to avoid narcissists. Some are coworkers, family members, even partners you once deeply trusted. But you can always choose how much of your energy you give them. You can choose when to engage, what to share, and how much space to maintain. This doesn't mean you become cold or paranoid. It means you become discerning. You learn to listen to your instincts. You begin to trust your gut when something feels off, even if you can't quite explain it yet. Because that intuition paired with awareness is often the first signal that your boundaries are being tested. In the end, awareness doesn't just protect you from narcissists, it elevates your entire emotional life. It teaches you how to value your time, your energy, and your peace. It teaches you that not everyone deserves access to the most vulnerable parts of you, and that's not selfish, that's self-respect. In a world where narcissists often move unseen, cloaked in charm and confidence, sometimes all it takes is one honest question to shift the power dynamic. Asking, how do you handle criticism, might seem small, but it's a quiet act of self-protection, one that shines a light on truth faster than any confrontation ever could. Because this journey isn't about calling someone out or exposing them in public. It's not about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about protecting your peace. It's about recognizing emotional red flags before you become entangled. It's about listening closely to how people respond when the spotlight shifts from praise to accountability. And when you begin to see clearly, when the mask drops, when the patterns reveal themselves, when your awareness sharpens, you're no longer at their mercy. You no longer seek validation from someone who cannot give it. You no longer trade your mental clarity for emotional chaos. You rise above it. Because in the end, you don't have to fight to expose a narcissist. You just have to ask the right question and listen carefully to the answer. That's where your power lives, in clarity, in courage, and in choosing peace over performance every single time.